And hello. It's now 5 o'clock in Amsterdam. It's 5 o'clock in Copenhagen. It's 11 o'clock in New York, and that means it's 8 o'clock in Los Angeles. What it is in Hong Kong, I don't even want to dream about. Welcome to the book launch for the Innovation Cycle. My name is Klaus Hostel, and with me I have Robert Laszlo Kiss. Robert, wave and smile.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, sorry, I was unmuted.
So, first of all, Robert is a lot smarter than I am and is also a wiser human being in general. So instead of doing a lot of the talking, he has chosen to spend most of the book launch actually drawing. So when the book launch is over, we will have a memento for all of us who were there and for the people who were not there. And that's because of Robert's doing. With me, we'll have no memory. There'll just be a lot of words, but they'll luckily be gone when we're done. Now, the first thing I want to say is that this book launch is not a traditional book launch. I've done plenty of those. This is an online book launch. And while this is my book number 30, it is the first book launch I've ever done online. So, of course, we're using software that we don't necessarily fully know how to use. Of course, there's going to be all sorts of small digital snags in it, but we're going to get the best out of it that we can. And that means that if things are not working, it's probably our fault. You're more than welcome to write. We'll be trying to monitor both LinkedIn and mail and YouTube comments, which should, according to theory, actually appear here in the StreamYard service. So if somebody can write a comment on YouTube, we're going to test that theory right away. If you're watching us via YouTube Live, please leave a comment. It can be more or less anything as long as we see if it actually works. Aha. And David Jewell, who also happens to be my brother and a co-author of the book, writes, "Hoorah! Perfect, amazing." And here's a comment then. It also has this lovely functionality that if you write on YouTube Live, we can blow it up here on screen. So you get to be part of the broadcast. We also have the lovely option of pulling in people because the StreamYard service is pretty nice. So we'll be pulling in some people, and it won't just be me talking and Robert drawing, but we'll be pulling in extra people as well. So the comments work. That means, and Karina says, "Ooh, great to see you guys and congrats." That is beautiful. Be aware, though, that if you do write a comment, we may just blow it up on the screen. Now, with no further ado, I first want to share a little bit about the harsh reality that is innovation. This is, we're just going to make it so you can see my screen. And here, boom. This is what a lot of people think that innovation looks like. This sort of room, there's like creative people, there's colors, there's nice tables. Everything is nice and clean, and you can see how engaged and happy and smiling they are. There's a lot of writing on the wall. This like screams creativity. There's even what looks to be an IKEA lamp in the back and kind of colorful, nice, soft plastic chairs. This is what innovation looks like to many people. The reality is that innovation is not this in the real world. And I'm going to shift my camera a moment because I have two cameras. We'll be using them both. This is innovation. This is my office currently because Sue and I recently moved to the island of Bornholm, and that means that my office is not yet fully unpacked. This is what innovation looks like in the real world. It's messy. It's cluttered. Things are not in their right places. There are beautiful plans. There's potential. This space is going to be amazing once it's done. But right now, to be frank, it looks terrible. And added to that Sue and I have a 2-year-old daughter, Saga, who took the business cards that are now lying on the floor and said, "Oh, these should belong to me." And by belonging to her, I don't mean she should actually take them and use them, but more like spread them all over the floor. So the difference between what we think of as innovation, or what many people think of as innovation, especially in like big corporate worlds, and the reality of innovation. This is one of the reasons why we wrote the book. And speaking of the book, here is the other camera, because right here we actually have them. Ooh. They arrived this morning outside of the house and had to be carried in, but this is what the book looks like physically. Ooh, very nice. Of course, it would be nicer if you could get one in your hand and hold it, but that will happen. We will send them out. They will be mailed pretty soon. So those of you who have gotten a link to actually order the thing, you're more than welcome to. And then they'll come out to you before too long. But before hearing more about this and before actually looking at one of the books, I want to invite a special guest. He's actually said something already. I'm just going to see if I can send a link. And David, can you, in a moment, click on the link in your mail? Then we will invite you into the studio, because StreamYard has this amazing feature where you can actually put people into the broadcast studio, which is pretty cool. So in a moment, we're going to be joined by David. And who is David for this? David is one of our co-authors. Robert and I were the main authors of the thing. I did most of the writing. Robert did all of the drawing. And then we invited some experts on innovation to join us for the Insights chapter. So in the book, there is a chapter called Insights, which is chapter 13, seen right here. And this chapter features people writing. Oh, and here we have David. How do we get you? David is solo. Aha, there's David. Excellent.
Hi, everyone.
So we invited experts on innovation, David being one of them, to contribute with small, short, standalone texts on what innovation means to them and what is important in the innovation work that they do. Some tips to share with the world. And David, thank you for joining us, both for writing the book and also right now. Your space looks much nicer than mine. I envy you that already. David, tell me your first thoughts of when I came to you and said, do you want to write for this book? And ignore the fact that we are siblings and have a shared lifetime of living under one roof.
You asked me in a spa in Northern Zealand when we were at a birthday gathering. Hi, everyone. My name is David Jewell. I work as a consultant in a small company called Resonance, and we work with resonance in organizations. Klaus, you asked me, innovation is it's a term I don't use that often, even though others might refer to me as an innovation expert. Because often when we start talking about innovation, often we actually forget to be innovative or actually do what's needed to be so. So I prefer just using everyday language and helping people and organizations get together on actually doing it instead of talking about it. And I don't know if I should reveal already a few of the highlights I put into the book.
Yes, please do. Please do. I need to unmute myself.
Yeah, so it's just a short essay I wrote, and my message to you working with innovation is actually pretty simple. It's just invite people into that process of co-creation. And I don't know you sitting out there, and a lot of people, when you say that, we are already doing that. And I would love to challenge that, or at least most of the clients that I work with on a weekly basis, I really need to challenge that, because people say they have a culture of innovation, they have a department working with innovation and development if it's large organizations. And sadly, they are still failing in actually succeeding delivering new results. And that step of inviting people into that open process of finding new ideas and also figuring out what the challenge is that we are ideating on can really be a struggle. So I imagine a lot of you are familiar with the principles from design thinking of going through iterative processes of ideating, understanding customers, clients' needs, and then co-creating, testing out concepts in that process. And I believe it's also, I haven't read the book yet. I'm looking forward to get it in a physical version. But that is some of the elements that are incorporated in this innovation cycle book here. But what I see is often that we invite someone into that design process, and often it's not all the right people that need to be there. So often we invite in some collaborators, we invite in some colleagues, and then we might test the results on our clients, but we only invite them into the testing part. And my clear recommendation is invite in for early co-creation. So the simple idea of, instead of presenting a solution for a client, actually inviting clients, customers, collaborators, all the employees, your CEO, your cleaning staff, and everyone into that co-creation process. I just did a seminar here before the weekend, working with an educational institution here in Denmark, and they want to start like building a new strategy. They want to be innovative. They want to succeed in the work that they're doing. And the change that they had initially planned was that invite all the lecturers and the leadership and some external people and the board into the same room to work on finding new solutions. And I asked them, what about your students? And they are like, but we're always in contact with our students. We know what they want. It's like they're so close to them on a daily basis, so they think they know them. And just this flip of asking them, why don't we invite them to be a part of this 2-day seminar, working on a new strategy? And it's a very, very small thing, but it made a great impact of this thing. We're not talking about people and what will work for people, but we are co-creating with them. And so many new insights came. Like I heard this, like the board after these 2 days standing there saying, it's so good to actually not just meet leadership and teachers, but actually meet the students. And in other contexts, that would be the clients, understanding not only their needs, but also their perspectives on things. So my clear advice is there to invite in all stakeholders in the early process of your defining your challenges or solutions. And be quite broad when you conceptualize or map who are our stakeholders. It can be clients. It can be employees across your organizations. It can be politicians. Like there's so many stakeholders when we begin mapping, and something really magical happens when we invite them into the same room.
Thank you, David. That was exactly what we were hoping for. You can see Robert is laughing because you're now being converted into a graphic version, and whether that's flattering or not, we'll find out.
We'll see.
Thank you for this. I'm going to remove you from the stream, and instead we're going to ask Jesper. David says hi, and we also have another co-author with us. Hello, Jesper Toft.
Hello.
Jesper, when I talked to you about this book and asked if you wanted to be part of it, the first thing you did was write something pretty nice, and it was 4 or 5 times longer than it needed to be, and then you self-published that because it was actually a pretty good text. And I think that says a lot about innovation in itself and about trying out and saying, okay, let's use it for something else. But tell me both about why you chose to be part of this book when I asked you, and second, tell me what you're bringing to within the covers that people may salivate over should they get a book in their hands.
Well, yes, thank you. First of all, I like working with you, Claus, because you always lift up the ambition for what I'm doing and ask questions to elevate the stuff that I'm doing. So I just took the challenge and wrote something about innovation from my own experience. And I come from product innovation and process leadership innovation. And what I find in this what you're writing about is interesting to see how management can avoid having any new thoughts. So we often design organizations just to avoid actually doing something new. And if you look closely, you will find that a lot of innovation processes just die out or are not enhanced by strategy or any real leadership, and that's a problem for many organizations. Yeah.
Thank you. This unmuting thing is going to kill me when I can't see myself. But
yeah, I can't see myself either.
You can't see we can all see you. Yes, you look
okay,
good.
Yeah, I know.
And your background looks good. And we now have a surprise visitor. Yes. We have a surprise guest for this. Hello, Saga. In a moment, I'm going to shut off my own microphone and let you talk some more, Jesper. Because if not, it's going to be completely co-opted by this maniac here. Yes, but what I wanted to hear is you also give some like very down to earth and relatable examples in your text, especially in the longer one. Can you share a bit of that in kind of the nitty gritty? Make it very real and very kind of concrete, so to speak. And now I'm going to mute myself.
Well, the longer is titled that if you scratch the surface of innovation, you'll find emotion. Because when you work with innovation, people have strong feelings about what is going on. We don't know the results. We have taken risks and we share either a common vision or we are fighting for our own vision. And in this space, a lot of emotion is just raw. So I think I started the text with an example. I was so extremely pissed that I yelled at my colleague for about an hour because he had continued an idea that we had dismissed in the last meeting. So he was just ignoring my input, and I was really upset about that. So that's just an example of how we often engage in what we do, and innovation processes have to allow for emotions as well, but also have to create a safe space and to move on. So we were not that good at actually managing our own innovation.
Yes, but I don't know if it's your stream or if it's here that we're having trouble, but we're having some sound trouble. Also, Saga, speaking of ignoring instructions and feedback, we have a struggle going on right now. The screen is frozen here for me. Is it also frozen for you guys?
I don't know.
Only you are frozen for us. At least for me. And there he goes.
I should be cabled in. All right. There he went, Robert. So,
yeah.
How did you like the process of writing a book with Klaus?
Well, I worked together with Klaus previously on a couple of projects, and I just really like this back and forth that we have with him. And it's like, for me, it's fun because I quickly come up with some ideas. It's basically the whole co-creation and iteration that you get out of a design process as well. I come up with some sketch ideas, run it by him, we iterate on it, come up with a new version, and then go on from there. And just in general, he had some really good ideas where we started out on the book and the direction he was going in. And yeah, he was so kind to say that I'm smarter than him because I'm quiet. But the truth is, I'm just not good at this sort of stuff. So I elected to be quiet if possible, and now we're sort of a little bit lost here.
So, but perhaps we should just keep on talking, or people will drop out of this since Klaus has dropped out.
Well, I agree. That's a good point.
So,
well,
no, okay. I'll just talk a bit
go on.
more about what I'm writing in my contribution. I write a lot about organization and leadership for this, and I stress the strategy. I stress also that you have to have an idea of what you're betting on, because innovation is a bet into the future. And a lot of people don't have any alignment on what they're betting on. So you can have ghost projects, and you can have... Okay, there's a question from David. Largest bomber on innovation? Well, actually, I got caught up in just letting go. So we had a really cool game coming up when I worked at Works, but it was such a difficult process. So at one point, I just let it go. But I was saved by the team, and especially one colleague she just insisted that we got it done. And that was quite nice. But that would be my largest bomber on innovation, with actually having an almost complete product with a lot of time and effort invested into, and then I just let it go because it was so difficult to get done. Did it answer your question, David?
We'll assume it did answer the question, since there's no comment. And sorry for disappearing for a moment. I was trying to say something clever about feedback not being listened to by Saga, but instead she also killed the internet connection. I'm glad the broadcast.
And one more thing, just to pick up on some of the stuff that David said with the co-creation, which is really good when you work with wicked problems and many stakeholders. In all of this, I would like to stress that you need to have a process, so we can see how far we've come. And I meet a lot of people who don't have any process.
Thank you, Jesper.
Yeah.
Am I live again? Can you hear me? Jesper? Am I at all alive?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
But you can hear me?
Yes.
Good. Can you see me now as well? There. Can you see me now as well?
There you go. Yes. Now we can.
Yes. I just want to say thank you, Jesper. And there's another question from Karina, which is great. Let's grab that. Karina says, what have been your biggest surprise? Oh, I can just put it on screen. Jesper, take it away.
Okay, then I'll just one last thing, one last piece of information from me then would be to try to know what you already know, because it's an example from a hospital in Denmark where the innovation manager went out to ask what would you like to have if you could, and they all gave examples of what would make their life easier. And then when he investigated into what was already happening at the hospital, he found that all the solutions that they were asking for was already in play in a different part of the hospital. So before you use a lot of time and effort innovating, please know what you already know. otherwise you will just innovate something that is not really new. So a big issue for innovation is the height, the leverage of the innovation, that it can, if you don't have enough knowledge, or you can innovate something that's really not an innovation.
Thank you, Jesper. And with those words, we're going to take Jesper off the live stream. Thanks, Jesper, for both contributing to the book and to this completely well-run and smoothly oiled event. Okay. And we are now back here, there. And we are joined. Hello, Scott. Welcome to the broadcast. Now, of course, there were several reasons for bringing on David and Jesper, who were kind enough to oblige. One was because just having me talking is really boring, even to me. The second is the most important, and we also write that in the book, that even though we have some thoughts on innovation, and what we tried to do with this book is to create like an innovation framework. A lot of innovation is done by people who would look at the question in a very, very different way. It's not so much that people don't agree on the answers. We don't even necessarily agree on the questions. And by getting in 10 other voices that were not our own, we thought this would be a nice way to bring people advice and tips from the real world, whether they like the framework or not. And yeah, David and Jesper agreeing, so nice match on that one. And also that this thing that Jesper mentions about people not knowing what's happening in big organizations is a classic. On that note, because we are now hitting about the half hour, I want to open up for people who have actual questions for either the book or for Robert or for me, because this format is well suited for it. Write them in the comments and we will deal with them here on stage, on screen. Okay, so obviously there are some kinks to be ironed out with this StreamYard thing. I have a double internet connection to make sure I don't get cut off, but it turns out that I'm the only one getting cut off so far. So I don't know how far I got, but the simple thing I was saying was, if you have questions for me or Robert or both of us, you are more than welcome to ask them. I will, of course, answer the ones on my own, and anything for Robert, we'll get him to take a break from his drawing to answer that. So any questions are doable, put them in the chat, and then I'm going to just be annoyed at my internet connection. Yes, David asks, what are the core elements in the innovation cycle? Can't do that. Here. We're going to share here and here and here. Voila. So this is both the table of contents for the book, but also the cycle in itself. And what we did, the whole reason that we wrote the book was we wanted to give people some tools for dealing with innovation better. Because in my experience, also in Robert's and a lot of other people's, the tricky thing with innovation is that everybody talks about it. Everybody knows that they need it. But point one, what it is pretty hard to define. And point two, it's very, very easy to get caught up trying to solve the wrong problems. So what we did was we tried to create a simple, well-defined 12-step framework so that you know where you are in the process. And so you know what problems it is that you should attack. And just to run you through it very, very fast is that it starts out with impossibility. we named everything with eyes to make it a little bit easier to remember and also to give it a certain sort of elegance. And since innovation was with an I already, well, we got our letter from there. It starts out with impossibility. It starts out with somebody saying, what if? What if things were different? Right now, there's no plan, there's no idea, there's just a what if it was different, leading directly to step number 2, imagination, which is, what if we did this? What if we put a man on the moon? What if we put wheels on suitcases? Our example throughout the book is, at least the drawn one, is with the rolling suitcase, or most people today just know them as suitcases, and in invention and innovation that's not that old. So step number 2 is imagination, is the raw idea. It doesn't necessarily make sense yet, but it's an idea of where to go. Leading to step 3, which is the actual idea. This is where things like blueprints and design come in handy, and where people who have a little bit of technical understanding have a huge advantage, because there's a huge difference between saying, let's put wheels on a suitcase, and saying, what should those wheels be made of? Rubber, cement, concrete, wood? Getting to an actual feasible idea is step number 3. From there, going to the actual invention, step number 4, whether it's physical or digital, or it's a concept like raising your hand during a meeting. Number 4 is when you actually try this in practice. It's the first prototype, so to speak. That is not the same as the idea. Edison is somebody we quote in there who's famous for having the idea for the light bulb and trying out many times before successfully being able to invent the light bulb. The next step is the actual innovation. We talk a little about in the chapter about how we both call it the innovation cycle and how innovation is a step in the cycle. A little bit misleading, but you have to use the words that are available. Innovation is doing something old in a new way. It's solving an old problem in a new way. It's, in this case, putting the wheels on the suitcase, even though both suitcases and wheels existed beforehand. But the innovation part of it is combining 2 old things, or combining something old to create a new solution. Now, where it gets really tricky for a lot of innovation is that they forget step number 6, which we call introduction, which is actually getting the users to accept it. If you've created a lovely administration system for a hospital, like one of those that David and Jesper have worked with, but all the staff there hate it, then your kind of plan of attack need not necessarily be to make the system better, but it's about getting people to actually try it out. And sometimes many innovation processes have a tendency to get stuck with, oh, the customers or the users didn't like it, so now we need to make it better. Well, no, you don't necessarily need to do that. You need to get the users to use it. This is often about education, about awareness, about spreading the word and listening to people. It's not necessarily about changing what you actually do. Bringing us to step number 7, which is iteration. What happens when 1,000 users gets hold of what you're doing? What happens when the suitcase has been used by 100 business travelers? It means that it goes back into the workshop, that you do changes. It doesn't have to be big changes, and you can usually, especially if you're doing something digital, you can run through iterations fast. In the old days, if you wanted to change a chair because somebody sat on it and said it should be wider or it should be slimmer or different materials, it went back into the physical workshop. Here, a lot of our workshops are digital and connected to the internet, so it's a lot easier to iterate on. But it's still in the workshop phase. It's still not mass market in any way. Bringing us to step number 8, integration. And this is when it really starts hitting society. This is when your product or your service or whatever it is you're doing gets used by a lot of people. Maybe it's 100 people, maybe it's 1 million people, depending on the scope of what you're doing. But this is when it really gets out and hits users big time. Leading us to phase 9, improvement. The difference between iteration and improvement is that it's very easy to iterate on, for example, the size of a Coke can. 33 centiliters, very standardized, very easy to iterate on that in the workshop. But once it's out there and there are supply chains in place and there are distribution chains, and it's hitting tons and tons of users, then even a small improvement is a huge thing. If you want to change the Coke can from 33 centiliters to 37, that's a crazy big task. Where if you did that when you were just introducing cans, very, very easy. Leading to phase number 10, which is imitation. Somebody copies you. Somebody says, that's great. We could do it better. We could do it cheaper. We could do it faster. Dealing with imitation there are many ways to do that. You could, for example, buy out the competition if they're small and you're big. You could change your product. You could hit them with legal stuff. You could change the way you present it. There are many ways of dealing with imitation, but you must realize it will happen if you're successful. Leading to number 11, phase number 11, industrialization. And this is not about Europe in the 1800s. This is about what happens when an industry forms around what you're doing. In the book, we use the example of yoga, because yoga has been around for many, 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 many years, but it's not that old, the yoga industry. It's when you start to see ecosystem products, when you start to see yoga pants and yoga mats and yoga TV shows and yoga schools and yoga this and yoga that and yoga yogurt for that matter. Industrialization, in our definition, happens when an industry forms around what you're doing. Of course, that leads to phase number 11, when somebody tries to change it again and says, what if, which is the new impossibility. And on the poster that Robert is putting together, this is going to be a nicely defined spiral, so a circle that slowly grows at the end, but it starts with impossibility and it ends with impossibility. So that, at its core, is the innovation cycle. Now you don't need the book, right? And a couple of extra questions appeared while I do that, but that was also a very, very long answer. Sorry for that. We go back to where there are questions. Here is, that's David's, number 2. Stacy, do you agree? Here it is. Do you agree and outline the process at the start of a brainstorm to help everyone get on the same page? Not necessarily. I mean, it would be nice if everybody understood this process by heart. And our hope is that more and more people will get there at some point. Of course, they need to learn it first. But understanding all the other situations in a workshop or in like a small team, you don't necessarily need to have an understanding of how to do big scale improvements, as these are two very, very different steps, even in one process. So I think I'll say, no, we don't need to outline the process as long as somebody understands the process and that people understand what it is they're doing. If they think they're innovating and somebody else thinks that they're dealing with imitators, then that's tricky. But no, you don't need to understand the whole framework just to work within part of it. What does your book say that...
All right, there we go. We lost him again. Let me, in the meantime, I can share my screen and show you what I've been working on while Klaus was explaining this whole thing. So it's basically what I do is try and capture what we're talking about. So you can see in the middle, it's Klaus and me and the thing and the whole screen that was there with the book and everything. And then we had Jesper and David share some of their really good ideas. I noted those down as well. And then now finally we nicely went through step by step with, which is basically the cycle itself. Oh, I do hope you can see the screen. Tell me if you don't see the screen because, well, technically I shared it, but I don't know if it is visible or not, if not, because Klaus is the host and he's not here. But anyways, I'm just gonna keep on going on with the explanation, hoping that you guys see the screen. So yeah, so now basically one of Klaus's answers was the cycle itself. Yeah, you can't see, great. I can't help that, so you can probably see me then, but you can't see the screen. Can I stop the camera? Will you see? No, you see nothing. So we do need Klaus for this. Once again, very sorry. It is a bit new technology for us. This is our new reality where we have to do the best what we can do. So sorry that you can't see the screen. We'll just have to wait a little bit for Klaus to come back. And I could turn this whole thing around, make it super analog, but sadly, not gonna happen. What is innovation for me? Karina asks. Well, I'm an industrial designer, so innovation for me is so we had a good talk with Klaus about innovation and the cycle itself, and how it does seem a little bit absurd having it in the title and having the step of innovation itself, but in itself innovation just making, for me, not necessarily making a product better coming from the industrial design point of view, but it's also seeing what the current context in society is and what is needed, and how can we make products fit the current context a little bit more. I have also interesting conversations with some of my friends that innovation sometimes is a little bit overused. We want to innovate everything. Sometimes innovation can be nothing else but maintenance itself, because we over innovate many things to the nth degree, where like really it's going to be hard to push it any further. But we have very and these things are very usable in the context, so there's no need to force innovation on them. So recognizing the fact that something is working already is I think is a good step for innovation. We say it's more mindset rather than intended process that makes the difference. For me, it is a little bit both. Coming from the engineering world, I do see the need of a process that for many products is necessary, but that's the whole idea that innovation is not just product, and innovation is not just a process related. So I would say it's a good combination of both, for sure, definitely. And for a second there, it seemed like Klaus might be coming back, and then he left again. It was funny, because we had a good talk with this at Klaus, that I am not the very best talker, and as you can see, he definitely has the stage presence much more than me, and he can throw around the discussion points much better than me. And now I am sort of in this limelight, and I have to innovate, well, not innovate, but just try and keep everybody entertained, while hopefully Klaus manages to fix his internet. And there is a black Klaus. Okay. Klaus,
Can you hear me?
back. We can hear you. We cannot see, we only see darkness, but at least we can hear you.
One of the things that's really lovely about this is that it's such a beautiful, and you lost me again, right?
No, I can hear you. Please go on. Or not. Oh, this is brilliant.
What the hell is going on?
We can hear you. Please keep talking. Let's see if no, we lost him. All right. So I guess it would have been very handy if we would have figured out. Yes. Okay, in the meantime, feel free to ask more questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So first of all, thank you very much, Karina, for keeping me afloat and helping me with going on with the conversation. Yes, hopefully. Yes, hopefully Klaus does take a look at the stream, and if he does, then I can share the screen, because it is shared. I think he just has to put it up onto the screen itself. Jasper, who do you know who should read this book? I do have friends. Well, I don't have the great network that Klaus has. That's for sure. I came out of university, 6 years ago. And I've been mostly working in strategy visualization field. So definitely a couple of the stakeholders of the companies that we worked for could benefit from this innovation book, for sure. Because I see every company that we helped with vision creation and strategy visualization they sort of had similar problems where having a structured thing like this would be very helpful, because as we said from the beginning with Klaus, and you can read it in the book as well, we didn't try to reinvent or re-explain again what innovation is. That's done in many ways and many different places, sometimes better as well. What we wanted is to create this sort of toolbox, this structure that people can follow and people can identify issues within their own cycle of innovation, or within their company where they see that they want to innovate and something might be going amiss. Then they can see this. And there's, and he's gone again. I feel like he's teasing me. He just, you're off the hook. No, you're not off the hook. But yeah, he does not seem to see our comments, and he's gone again. Okay. Yeah, Karina was thinking the same. Well, yes, I guess this is just things that happen when you're live streaming. You have to be prepared. Klaus, are you gonna stay?
I'm going to try my best to stay.
Yes, please do that.
You hear me now?
Yes, can you also maybe just in the meantime shift on, I wanted to share my screen for the people to see.
Yes.
But they cannot see it. I think that's your power.
Blah, blah, blah. Screen sharing was canceled. How do I make you, can you share the screen now?
It is shared.
It is shared.
Yeah. So maybe, oh no, that's just my face again.
That's just your face again. How do we make
I guess.
No, I can't see how to.
Okay. You did mute yourself though, successfully, I must say.
Am I good now?
Yeah.
What the fuck? I have zero idea. I've been at this new place. I've had zero problems with internet. I'm in back-to-back Zoom meetings most days. We tested this earlier to make sure things work, and then it's just like crash, 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 crash. And now my one camera is out. Oh, Robert shared screen. Something's happening.
No, I just renamed it Robert shared screen, but I turned off my mic and nothing is really happening. Okay, wait a second.
Can't see how to share that. But it seems I'm back, and it seems that my one camera just died, but I luckily have an extra one. Can you? Oh, yes, Robert.
Oh,
there. Perfect. That's what we want.
Okay. So I think I just needed to reshare it so you could see it as well.
That looks very nice.
Okay. Yeah. So as I was trying to explain to everybody why nobody was seeing things, I just did a quick capture of what was going on here, you and me, and in the screen, and then also the book. And then Jesper and David were so nice to give us a couple of sentences of what they are thinking of innovation. And then we also went through this cycle sort of process, which is also in the book, point by point. And this is our little sketch that I did so far.
I think you need to put in Karina saying this is a book launch to remember. And then we'll just let that stand. We'll just let that stand on its own without actually saying that part of the reason is that the main host managed to almost give up and die completely. Yeah. But it seems that things are working now to the extent that they are. So I'm going to actually see if there are any questions left that I might contribute with. But I think, Robert, that it was really good that this died, because if not, you would have been able to hide behind the screen. And instead, I get the feeling that you said a lot of smart stuff that people really appreciate, because that's how it usually is with you. You try to hide.
I told everyone that this is sort of like Carmine, you're teasing me with coming back and not really coming back in the end.
I wish it was on purpose. It would make it even better. Um, Okay, so I think to make it easier for people, if there are some of the questions that still make sense to answer, we'll see Robert drawing in the meanwhile. Please repost them, and then I'll do my best to actually help out this time. Now that I'm back, I can answer one thing. Karina's saying, will a reader, says here, will a reader be able to apply the circle and insights from your book in a meaningful way without prior experience? Yes, 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 and yes. If there's one thing that both Robert and I are huge fans of, it's making things simple and understandable, so that this is written in such a way that you can pick it up having zero experience with running a business or running a big organization or anything like that. You have zero experience with product innovation or process innovation or whatever it is, and you can still find something useful in it. So yes, yes, and very much yes. Stacy writes here, in your experience, what is the spot in the cycle that most frequently trips organizations up? So Tanmay had a question earlier, which was, what would you suggest are some ways one could achieve good and seamless market introduction? Point 6. And I'm gonna answer a little bit of both, because one of the things that goes wrong the most often is that you get people. In this day and age, it's often software engineers or digital architects or that sort of thing. And then they build something amazing, but nobody cares. And their reaction to nobody caring is, we need to make it even better. And then instead of bringing on somebody who might be a marketer or who might be a digital evangelist or what have you, they bring on some more engineers, not imagineers, some more engineers. So market introduction, even if it's just to a few users, is one of the places where I see things failing the most. And that's because when you're in a lab, whether it's in front of a computer or a physical one, or you're designing new processes for meetings or whatever you're doing, you get excited about what it is. You have a plan for how people will receive it. And when they don't receive it that way, it's very, very hard to pivot. It's very, very hard to say, oh, so we produced a new personal computer for spreadsheets, the Apple Macintosh, and then they use it for graphic design. Obviously, they're using it wrong. It took Apple quite a bit of time to realize that they hadn't created a computer that was going to be used for Excel and for spreadsheets, which they thought they were, but was going to be used for graphic design due to its interface. That is not easy. It's not easy when you write a book that's meant to be like an adult, serious philosophical book, and it turns out you're suddenly a young adult author. It's not easy when you create a process that's about creating more smooth voting in sports organizations, and you find out that you've suddenly become a tool for a political movement. Realizing that the market you're trying to introduce to may not think the same of your product or your service as you do, and it may not even be the same market. It may not even be the same people. That is pretty damn challenging. It is something that trips up a lot of people. So number one is market introduction. Even if it's very, very small, that's a tricky one. Number two is the improvement process. It's so easy today to think that everything is digital, so we'll just roll out an update and we don't need to finish it because we can just change it. But people get set in their ways. Even with digital stuff, every time there's a new update to something like Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, people cry bloody murder, even if it usually gets to the point where, okay, this was actually pretty smart. People don't like change. And a beautiful story from my past is when I owned a weapons factory that produced latex weapons, not machine guns and bombs, but we owned a latex weapon factory, and our production chief, our kind of chief engineer, brilliant innovator and brilliant inventor, he said that one thing he'd found out earlier before us joining was every time he changed the colors on the swords, then people would complain. If he made them darker, they'd complain that they were now too dark. If he made them lighter, they'd complain they were now too light. So at one point he tried changing them, making them darker. And then people said, oh, they're too dark, it'll never sell. And then of course they sold. And then he changed them back to the original color. And then they said, oh, they're too light, they'll never sell. And after that, he stopped worrying about what his distributors felt. He just changed them based on his own aesthetics. because people don't like when things change, even if they like it afterwards. They don't like the act of change. And that's a place where companies often go wrong in the improvement phase, because they think it's the same that they have 10 users or 20 users and changing up stuff. Like here, we have 12 people watching according to YouTube Live, which is probably off, but it's not like we have 100,000 people watching. So we can completely change how we're doing this without it costing us a lot. But the moment we have 100,000 people watching, then just the act of change, we're going to lose quite a few of them, and they're going to get annoyed. So 6 and 9 are the two phases where I see most organizations failing. Bingo, Stacy writes, number 6 is where I've used entertainment to help introduce internally and externally, using the power of theater to show instead of tell. Beautiful, beautiful. And a great way around it, because then they're focusing on the entertainment, not on the change. Other questions? Karina, did you get a good answer to who would you recommend to be the lead for this in companies too small to have the competence in-house or buy it? Because if not, I will gladly take that out for a spin, but maybe Robert already did that. Oh, I'll ignore that and answer it anyway. At least my thoughts on it is that the lead for this needs to be somebody with decision-making power. In a small company, whether it's 3 people or 7 people or 17 people, you probably won't have the specific competences to do this sort of thing on their own, because people will have a million things they're doing, and there'll be a ragtag bunch of friends, first hires, and people who are starting to be brought in during one of these like growth journeys, the first specialists. So if you're going to do innovation, then the higher up in the hierarchy you are, the better the chance of something actually happening, especially if nobody has the skills. If nobody has the skills, at least the leader or somebody close to the top will have the decision-making skills. So if you can't get a specialist, because of course, if you're 5 people, you're not going to have an innovation specialist on your team, then at least make sure it's somebody who can make decisions, who's leading the process. That was a lot shorter than I thought it would be, therefore the dramatic pause. Ruud, what is the, oh, I'm going to put it on screen. I really need to get used to this. It's great software, but I'm definitely not an expert at it. What is the hardest conversation to have to get buy-in from the org's head honcho? Ooh, here I'm going to draw on the McKinsey expertise, and more specifically on a McKinsey study that I found fascinating, but also frightening. And that said that for any big change management process, especially with digital transformation, that sort of thing, when you suddenly need to go from one thing to another or go from analog to digital, you need to do a big change in the organization. The study found there were 3 factors that were equally important. There was like 33% importance, more or less. Reality is more complex, but this was like a thing their huge study found. 33% of the importance came from the leaders in the organization in general. So if you have 20,000 people, you're going to have quite a few people in leadership positions. And if they don't do it, or if they don't buy into now you're using Slack, or now all communication is in German, or whatever it is, then that's going to have a massive chance of failure. So that's 33% is the leaders in your organization, whatever that may look like. 33% more is the executive leadership team, the top leaders, the chief marketing officer, the chief financial officer, etc., the C-levels, especially in big organizations. And in big organizations, this is usually not a lot of people. This might be 5 or 10 people, but even in a 10,000 person organization, the study found that they had 33% of kind of the impact for whether change was successful or not. And with the question about the head honcho, that's the last 33%. The CEO or the top boss, head honcho, 33% of the impact or kind of the success came from that one person. Because what they found was that you would have huge organizations. And
Klaus, sorry, just a second. We were losing you a little bit after the executive teams.
Thank you for that. I was on a roll. The last 33% are the CEOs. the top bosses, the head honchos. Because what happens, the study found, was yes, you get all the leaders in the organization on board. Now we're doing everything via email memos. No more Facebook, no more Messenger, no more SMSs, no more WhatsApp. All of us are doing emails. That's our only communication. Then the executive team will get on board and you have another 33% chance of success added to that. But the CEO says, oh, I still want to have things delivered to me in person, or I want to have a PowerPoint slide made for me, or I only want to use Slack. And what their study found was that the amount of influence that not getting the head honcho on board was insane. 33% for one person. Imagine Coca-Cola deciding that they never again use email for communication, going the opposite of the example before, that they only use Slack. Everything is now shifting to Slack and Coca-Cola globally. Crazy big project, crazy transformation. And in that, according to the McKinsey study, if the CEO says, nah, I'm not doing it, I'm doing my own thing. You can reach me on the phone or WhatsApp or you can mail me, but I'm not going to use Slack because I don't like it. That reduced the chance of success considerably. So 1/3 the CEO, 1/3 the executive team, and 1/3 the leadership in general. The employees, sure, they had impact, but you can change them if they don't fall in line, and mostly they do. So I think, Ruud, to answer the question, the hardest conversation is to say, boss, if you don't buy in, this is going to fail. And it's so easy when you're the head honcho of a big organization, or even a small or medium-sized one, to say, go out and change because it's good for all of us, but not me. We should all have runs on Fridays so we can become more healthy, but I'm not going to participate. Or we should all be at the team building events for the all company, but I'm too busy because I'm out doing client work. Having that conversation with your head honcho and saying, you need to lead by example, you need to role model, because it's crazy important. And even McKinsey says so. That, I think, is a hard conversation. And Scott Lovely plugs engagement. Yes, yes, yes. Tame says here, how do you deal with what comes after a failed change innovation process and we have created a mess? Oh, that's a beautiful question. Thank you, Tame. So the first thing, and this is incredibly hard, I've spent most of my career in live action role play, and that meant trying to explain to people, what is live action role play? Why is it relevant to you? What can it not be used for? Why should you try it? What problems can't it fix? That's been a big mess, because what happens is when people don't understand a thing, they will see an example of the thing as the thing itself. And by that, I mean, somebody tries, and you've probably seen this yourself in your own life. Somebody will say, oh, I don't like escape rooms. I tried one. Or I don't like hip hop. I listened to a song. Or I don't like social media because I was on MySpace once in a while. And the tricky thing is that if you have nuance, if you have a broad understanding of a thing, books, movies, food, whatever it is, children, you realize that not everything is the same. And just because you saw one lousy movie doesn't mean that all movies are lousy. Maybe you just didn't like this particular one. Maybe if you've seen one horror movie, you're going to say, oh, I don't like horror movies. But what if you like the next one? Then you're going to say, oh, I don't like this sort of horror movies. And with innovation, the reason I mentioned this is that innovation and innovation processes are a lot of buzzwordy stuff that doesn't get to be nuanced. So somebody will say, oh, we tried innovation, it didn't work, which is, of course, utter bullshit. It's like saying, I don't like books. Okay, you don't like books. Have you read any? Well, yeah, I opened one and looked at 3 chapters and it was boring. So now you've judged all books in all history. It's a little bit tricky. And because innovation is such a buzzword, people will think they know what it is when they've tried it. So when an innovation process fails, the most important thing you can do to begin with is to make sure people realize that this was a innovation process, not the process of innovation itself. So just because one failed doesn't mean the next one will fail. We had a lovely example from a friend who was at a big video game company, and he came and said, hey, Klaus, can you help out? We want to have more engaging meetings and do some sort of immersive experiences at our meetings for all of our staff. And we've tried already, but it sucked. So we've realized we need to try with somebody better. What most people would do is say, we tried it, and now we're never going to try that again, because we now think that's not the right way to go. So start out by making sure that people understand, just because this failed, innovating on a new communication platform or a new payment process or a new sales technique or whatever it is, doesn't mean that innovation fails. It just means that this innovation failed. That's the first thing you need to do. And the next is to try to clean it up as best you can. Maybe it's going back to where you were. Maybe it's saying, okay, at least we got halfway. At least we got half the company on Slack. So that'll make it easier to get the rest of them along next time. But failed innovation is terrible, because it's harder to go from there than if you started up with a clean slate, because now you have all the people who are going to resist because they don't realize that getting halfway up the mountain will make it easier to get all the way up, at least in some cases. So make sure they understand it was just one process, not all processes, and clean it up as best you can and keep smiling. And we have here Nicholas Coleman. Could Richard Branson learn something from your conceptual approach? Yes, he definitely could. And the reason I say that with such certainty is because Richard Branson, while an amazing innovator and a master communicator, also runs into the same problem that we all do, which is that it's hard to communicate complex things in simple ways. And innovation is one of those. So even if he could explain this in a better way than we do, well, then he'll learn one thing. He'll say, oh, they wrote a book about innovation. I could write a better one. Well, then he learned something. And if he doesn't think that, if he says, oh, this is actually useful, then he could give it to some people who are skeptics and say, see, there's a framework here. And these really smart people are behind it, so you should trust them. One of them is even an industrial design engineer. He knows innovation, right? Because even Richard Branson, I'm sure, suffers from the problem that we all do, that nobody's a prophet in your own country. And that it's nice to be able to refer to somebody else, to somebody else's work, because then you fight the work instead of the person. That's why whenever we can, in the book, we quote somebody else. It's a good trick for writing books in general. That if I can say, yes, but Tufts said it, or even better, if McKinsey said it, then you don't have to fight me, you have to fight them. So yes, I think even Richard Branson could learn something from this. I might be wrong. I'm just reading on what it says, but it's comments, so I'm just happy we can all read those. Other good explanations. We're going to round off before too long, so I'm going to give us like 10 minutes more, and then we're going to round off. So if there's like a last question or two, please fire away. Robert, you might want to add an asterisk and like a "we think" to that. And if any of you, Nicholas, if you know Richard Branson, please let him know that there's a book with his name on it if he wants one. I don't expect him to come knocking anytime soon, but you never know. Rud says, how do you test your innovation alternatives most effectively when the train has already left the station? By realizing that a busy station has trains leaving all the time. And one of the things that I usually ask when I'm brought into an organization, whether it's a small one or a big one, is what is the biggest change you can do tomorrow without asking anybody's permission? Start from there, because it's very, very easy to dream of, oh, if I was the CEO of McDonald's, we would go completely vegan. Maybe that's true, but A, you're not the CEO of McDonald's. And number two, even if you were, it would probably be a hell of a battle to get McDonald's to go vegan. So try something small. Maybe it's you can move around the furniture. Maybe you can launch a project. Maybe you can do a conference. Maybe you can change something bigger. But it's much more interesting to start out innovating today with something small and then take that as a stepping stone to something big. Because then when you go to your boss or your colleagues or your board of directors or whoever you answer to, and you say, I've already done this, I want to do more of it, do I have your support? Then you're not starting with a blank canvas. If you're a startup and you're looking for investors, all investors, and they're annoying, they will come and say, do you have proof of concept? Do you have some numbers we can look at? Have you already shown us that it works? Can you take away our risk? It's the same with innovation. So if the train has already left the station, well, I suggest you find a smaller train and you put some power to it and you fire it away, because there are trains leaving the station all the time. Some of them are just smaller than the others. But a small train is a good reason for letting somebody trust you with a big train. Thank you, Rud. Last question, and then we'll do a few round-off words. Okay, I'm going to use that as an excellent point, because what we are seeing right now in practice is a classic case of expectation management. And this also destroys innovation processes, because just by saying this is the last question, there are some people who would gladly have asked a question who are thinking, ooh, it's not important enough to be the last one. And that means that instead of getting a last question, which could have come from anybody, then people are like, oh, I have a question, but is it good enough? Ooh, it's special, da, 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 da. And that happens in any sort of idea work as well, that people look at what it is they're asked to contribute, and then they put on extra, whether it's things that make it harder for themselves or for their team, depends on what it is. So here, somebody throw in the last question and don't worry about whether it's good or not. It's good because it's the last one. Robert's also soon running out of space. Oh, Robert, there's a great question. I can't really see who asked it, but you should see it on screen. And remember to unmute yourself when you answer.
Can you do that? Very good question, Mr. Klaus. Yes. I can do that for innovation process as well. Basically, the whole thing behind drawing is just to make people's thinking a little bit clearer, make people see what they're talking about. So I find in an innovation cycle or innovation process, this is just as valuable as in any other process, because basically you're seeing what you're talking about and you can immediately iterate. If you said something bad, or if you see that one point in the process is not working out, you can see it there in front of you on a paper. You can iterate on it, change it, move on. It's basically rapid prototyping as well, a little bit. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Robert. And that means for the actual last question, after me getting to tease Robert, also because he's brilliant and I love working with him, is Karina says, what did you learn from writing this book? Robert, what did you learn from writing this book? I'll answer last then. But I'm much more curious than what I learned.
What did I learn from writing this book? Well, I learned that an innovation cycle can be expressed in a lot of I words that start with I. I was not prepared to learn that. But I also learned that book writing is something that can be, it's an innovative process for me because I didn't know it. So that was personally very interesting for me. I throw the ball back at you.
I like that. I learned a couple of things doing this. One, I learned that my hypothesis that a book that has a talented illustrator is just a better book is true, and it makes the whole process of writing so much more engaging for me, at least. So that's one thing that I learned. I was hoping to learn that, but it actually happened. And a second thing is that even though it's tempting to take a book and focus on the book part, then I'm glad that we took a book and focused on what's the book for. Because if you look at writing fiction, and I've done quite a bit of fiction, both stable and interactive in my years, then you quickly get caught up in making the book, if you're writing a book, as good as possible. And you spend endless amounts of time refining and fine-tuning, all that sort of thing. And here, when I read it through, when it came, I realized we still have a couple of typos in there. And some of them are ones that people will laugh at. I definitely did. But they don't detract from the big picture. And we could even spin it so that in a messy book about innovation, of course, there's some messy typos. But most of all, that we could easily have spent a couple of months more refining and polishing, but we didn't. And I've done that before with other books, but this is the first big, serious, ambitious business book where I've used that way of thinking. And it's just as effective here as in smaller circles. So even if you get to a bigger arena, don't be afraid of trusting your instincts and using what you already know. And then while I was answering Cephas wrote a last question, I'm just going to answer that, and then we're going to cut off and we're going to be done for today. And thank you all for being here. Cephas writes, as an intrapreneur, you're a disruptor, but companies are built to resist disruption. How do you best stay on the right side of the bigger org while still pushing the boundaries far enough? That's a tough one, but I think the real answer to that is by having an ally, or by having enough allies in the big company. If people understand what you're doing, and I know this goes a little bit against what I said at the beginning, that you don't need to understand all of it, but if people understand what you're doing, then there's a bigger chance they'll accept it. One of the reasons we accept, at least to a certain degree, that we accept the power of parents and of institutions in general, it's because we understand why they have it and what they're doing with it. We understand that it's part of the duty of somebody to tell us when to go to bed, or when to stop doing this, or when to move faster. It's like a personal trainer. If you have a personal trainer that is telling you one more even when you're in pain, well, then you accept that. But if the personal trainer is just some random person coming over and saying one more in an annoying way, you're not going to accept it, even if the action is the same. So I think if you want to be a successful intrapreneur, you need to have strong allies in the bigger organization. First off, you need the ones with decision-making power to shield you instead of kill you off if you become too successful or too problematic, but also some on the ground floor to make sure that they're supporting you and saying, hey, I'm so annoyed at the guys over in Sector X. And somebody says, no, they're doing really cool stuff. And the fact that they're annoying us means they're successful, so we can all rejoice. Just that small, simple thing will make your life easier, because if they don't understand what you're there for, then you're just annoying. And nobody likes people to be annoying outside their organization, but especially not within. So make sure you get them on board. As David would have said, they're also your stakeholders, even if they don't feel like direct ones. And now we are at 18:19. We've spent an hour and 20 minutes roughly, and that means we have come to the point where you get to see Robert's finished drawing. If you email me afterwards, then you'll get a copy of it. But for now, we just have one thing left to say, and that is thank you for joining us. Thank you for adding your input. Thank you for listening, and have a lovely day, evening, whatever it is where you are. Have I forgotten something, Robert? Or are we good to go?
No, I think you thanked everybody perfectly, and I would like to say the same thing, but you already said it so nicely, so I'll just hang on to your words.
Then we're going to end the broadcast.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.